We call to order the Tuesday, May 19th, 2026 meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Andrews,
Present.
Councilmember Beckman,
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Here.
Vice Mayor Casissa,
Here.
Mayor Thomas.
Here. Please join me for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. It is now open time where any member of the public may address the town council concerning any item that is not on this council's agenda tonight. Speakers have 3 minutes. There'll be a timer on the screen. Please keep an eye on that. The public has an opportunity to speak on each other agenda item when it is called. Do we have anyone in the house who would like to speak? Anyone online?
No hands raised from our attendees online, and we didn't receive any emailed public comment for open time.
All right, we move on to the consent calendar. The purpose of the consent calendar is to group together items which are routine or have been discussed previously and do not require further discussion. They will be approved in a single motion. Any member of the public may comment on the consent calendar. Town council, town staff, or public may request removal of an item for discussion. Do we have anything with the town council that they'd like to discuss? I recognize Councilmember Andrews.
Can you please pull 4C?
4C.
And then I'd like to move the other items, 4A, B, and D.
And I'll second that. Right. Do we have any member of the public on the phone who are online who would like to remove anything or discuss anything?
We do not have hands raised from our attendees online. We didn't receive any requests from members of the public to pull any items. And we also didn't receive public comment for any items on consent.
All right, then.
Well, we just got a hand raised
okay.
from someone. Okay, Riley Hurd.
Members of the council, my name is Riley Hurd. I believe you just pulled off item 4C, and if there's going to be an independent time for public comment about that, then I will wait until then. If now is the time, then I will do it now.
That'll come up next.
Yes, there will be. All right, then. So we have a move to approve the rest of the items on the consent calendar?
Yes.
Did we get a second?
And we did receive a second
All
from
right.
Councilmember Ravazio, so I'll call the vote. Councilmember Andrews?
Yes.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa?
Yes.
Mayor Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Discussion on that item. Would you like to begin that?
Yes, I'd like to have this tabled until we can verify for certain that none of this right away will be needed during the rebuilding of the overpass. I don't want to give up any of our easement, once we've verified that and that they won't need it for construction or anything like that, then I'm more than willing to have us give up this easement. But right now, I think it's premature to give up that easement, right? So.
If I can just say something before we table it, Alan, can you maybe give us the background on this?
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful. And just kind of like where it's at, because I know there's a map in here, but it's.
Yes, absolutely. So the background on specifically the public access easement, which is part of the subject of this report tonight, relates to an easement that was created in 1985 during the development of the Village Shopping Center. I think it was called something else at that time. And at that time, it was contemplated that there could be a potential future pedestrian bridge that would land in the Macy's, that property where the Macy's is currently developed. That map, which is included in the staff report, is on page 4 of your staff report for 4C. And what that is showing in sort of that orangish or pinkish color is that really the easement was located in the parking area around the southern and western side of that property on private property. What's being discussed today is, and frankly, this was sort of a new sort of discovery recently, but as there's a potential private development going to occur, as you know, the council knows this is one of our housing development sites, and so Macy's has been closed for some time. This was discovered recently as part of the sort of the background and discovery related to the title report. This came up, and I would say, staff's recommendation here is really for 3 reasons. One, this was intended to be a project that started probably shortly after the development of the village. It was never started. It's been 40 years. Nothing's actually happened. Secondly, I would say the developer was at that time only obligated really to hold an easement for public access, no contributions to actually make sure anything was constructed. They had some other offsite improvements that were part of their actual financial contributions to the town at that time. Third, the Tamalpais overcrossing project right now is entirely within public property, which is outside of the bounds of this property here. I just want to be very clear, Councilmember Andrews, this has no relationship to the actual proposed Tamalpais overcrossing project, which will be constructed entirely in public property, Caltrans property on both sides of the current vehicle overcrossing that exists there today. And really, it's going to be like a new 15-foot wide appendage to that bridge that exists that's going from west to east. And so I can confirm that, and certainly happy to bring that to the council this summer. We were just talking to Caltrans yesterday about their 95% plans and drawings. And I want to make sure that we get that presentation to you, the council, this summer, so that you can see exactly where it lands. But I can confirm 100%. There's no implication or effect on the Tamalpais overcrossing. There's no relationship to this action being requested of the council tonight. And finally, I think we've also, as discussed in the staff report, are recommending that this be vacated because of it's really an impediment to the development of housing on the Macy's site, which is outlined in the staff report. Amy can certainly speak to that as well, and essentially made obsolete by the fact that we are already building the Tamalpais overcrossing really in a very close proximity to where this easement is located, but certainly not onto the private property here. And so for all those reasons, and I think there's also information that there is no separate easement on the other side of the highway. For all these reasons, we think really this is an obsolete public access easement at this time. The Tamalpais overcrossing project's really going to make it obsolete. We'll get our pedestrian 15-foot wide pedestrian and bicycle and ADA access from the east to the west side of the highway, and are recommending that this be vacated at this time. Anything you want to add to that, Amy, at this time? Thanks.
I have a
Is
question.
that helpful?
Yeah, no, it's helpful. If we vacate, there's no monetary compensation then that we would be getting because we're flat out just vacating.
Correct.
Okay. And then vacating legally, we're doing this according to law. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, some of the bicycle people were concerned that we might be jeopardizing future possible easements if we wanted to, say, do a simple pedestrian and bicycle pathway farther down in the shopping center, near the center somewhere. Does this affect that in any way?
No, my understanding is that this is really confined to the Macy's property. And so the center whole area of the shopping center is owned by a different property owner, Macerich. And so this has no relation to potentially in the future, some other idea that may happen. If that comes to fruition from like, if we're talking like the center core of the village over to the west,
Mhm.
which I know has been considered or thought of in the past as part of some older plan. So no, the answer is no.
Thank you.
Any further questions from
Yeah,
council?
it's been a few years since I looked at the overpass thing. But so I recall the path will be on the north side of the bridge. And once it goes over, where will all the pedestrians and bicyclists go? And do we need to save 15, 20 feet strip along that side of the road just so that
Right.
we're assured that, otherwise, I have no problem with giving up the land. I just want to make certain.
Sure. Yeah. Yes. So right now, the proposed overcrossing on the north side of the bridge, that's correct, will land at a redesigned, reconfigured intersection that accesses the northbound 101, as an
Right.
on-ramp or to the northbound 101. There'll be a new transit island for buses that will be included there. You will cross a new crosswalk to the essentially property that's in front of the Macy's on that corner, the southwest corner of the Macy's property, and still public property. And we've ensured that Caltrans is planning for a 10-foot wide sidewalk at that point, which will then carry some distance down to where the Caltrans right of way ends. And we will have to pick up from there down to the next crosswalk, which is the intersection of San Clemente and Redwood Highway, to get across then to the bike, the class 1 bike path.
And we have all the easements we need to do all those pieces right now.
We do. There's a considerable amount of public right of way from the curb of the existing curb to the property line of the private property. And so I will say, some of this we want to actually coordinate and make sure we're coordinated with whatever designs and developments are going to be proposed for this new development on that site. And obviously, I think Amy's working and her team. These nothing's being proposed. I want to be very clear at this time, but just preliminarily, it makes sense that there could be enhanced landscaping access points along that stretch east of the Caltrans. As you go from the corner of the intersection of the northbound on-ramp to 101 down to San Clemente. And that will be a really important sort of design exercise to make sure that that's a comfortable, pleasant experience for both bicycles and pedestrians, so you can get to San Clemente, the intersection there, and then back onto the class 1 bike paths and all the access points from there.
I have a question on that, if it's okay. So obviously, if we're trying to connect pedestrians and bicyclists to the both sides of town, shortest distance, taking them all the way down to San Clemente before they can get into the shopping center seems really incongruous to that objective. So can you explain that we have a plan?
Well, again, it's too early to even, this is still owned by Macy's at this time, this property, and there is no plan for development other than there's interest in potentially purchasing the property and having a development on that site. And so, but I would say from my experience as a planner, and I would agree that there's important to get access into the site from rather than sort of going all the way around the site to the
Right. For
intersection. So,
workers and everything coming off the
yeah,
bus.
right from the bus stop and easy access into the
Right.
site is
As
important.
long as I know that's on our yeah, I think we can make that work. I mean, because they'd be crazy not to want
Yeah.
to have that better
I
access.
think we agree as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Have any other comments or questions from the council?
Riley,
Well, you know what? I will come back because I am going to open up open time. for the
that's
public to
Riley Hurd,
speak.
right?
Hmm?
Riley Hurd's waiting.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. So I'm going to open up time for public comment now.
Okay, we only have Riley Hurd's hand up.
All right.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Riley Hurd. I'm a local land use attorney, specialized in state housing laws and projects in Marin. I also participated extensively in your housing element update process, and I have personally advised, I would say, a couple very serious potential developers for the Macy's site. And I can tell you right now that this easement is an absolute full stop impediment to being able to develop this property because it's huge, it's massive, it takes up about a third of the site, and it's a late discovery. So this was not known when the site was held out to HCD as the cornerstone of Corte Madera's housing element. And it really needs to be dealt with. That being said, I absolutely understand the concerns about the bridge connectivity. So I think it's super important to highlight that this easement is only for a bridge that connects the village and the town center as contemplated at the time that those two developments were coming online. Unfortunately, it never happened, and no easement was obtained at the town center. So this bridge connectivity easement is useless, and it could not be used for pedestrian and bicycle access as part of the new pedestrian and vehicular overcrossing or the remodel of that, because that's a separate project than what this easement was intended for. I can tell you that everyone who's looking at this site is very aware of the need for connectivity. That will be a critical marketing part of anything that gets built here, and it's going to be built in a plan whether they're forced to or not. But this easement doesn't do that. All it does is take up a huge part of the site, and it's an artifact that can't be used, which is why the vacation process is critical if the housing element is going to remain valid when it comes to this critical piece of property. So I completely agree with the staff recommendation, and I think it's really important that this happened this evening. And I've spent a fair amount of time reviewing the easement, and I'm open to any questions if you have them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other hands raised?
No other hands raised and no emailed public comment for this item.
All right. So do we have any, oh, it looks like your hand is going up. You have a comment. So, Councilmember Beckman.
Thank you. Just wanted to weigh in real quick. I appreciate both Jim and Pat's questions and points raised. Those were concerns of mine as well. I think, absolutely wise to be making sure that this does not interfere with the overpass rebuild. And I completely agree. I think long term, I think a better pedestrian connection between town center and the village is a key thing for linking East and West Corte Madera. But I explored this with Adam yesterday. I'm comfortable at this point that this is not an impediment and that this easement would not be the solution to making that happen. I don't even think it's in the right place to make it happen. And we need two willing partners in those those property owners before that can move forward anyways. So I think taking that into account and understanding that we need this housing, this is a really exciting project for Corte Madera. I would not want to see us make a decision here that would be an impediment to seeing that project move forward. So I just wanted to register my support for moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other, yes, Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes, I would echo what Eli just said, that we should move quickly. There's no reason I can see. I mean, I've only been looking at it for a few days, but it's pretty clear that this was not intended to be any part of the Caltrans thing. Caltrans probably doesn't even know about this easement. And I think we need to do it in order to allow the forces that are trying to figure out what to do with this one more big vacant property in Corte Madera, that we should be timely and do it tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Casissa.
Yeah, with that, I can support it also, and I can make the motion to approve 4C.
Second,
Councilmember Andrews,
yes.
Councilmember Beckman,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa,
Yes.
Mayor Thomas.
Yes,
Thank you. The motion carries.
thank you. Moving on to public hearings. Item 5A, discussion and acceptance of annual report of staff vacancies, recruitment, retention efforts as required under AB 2561. I believe that's going to be presented by Assistant Town Manager Rebecca Vaughn.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is the town's annual AB 2561 report on staff vacancies, recruitments, and retention efforts. This is a required public hearing. I'll keep my summary somewhat brief since a more detailed overview of the new law and its requirements were provided to council last year. Next slide, please. AB 2561 requires public agencies to provide an annual report on job vacancies and recruitment and retention efforts at a public hearing before the adoption of the final budget. The purpose of the law is to promote transparency around staffing levels, recruitment challenges, and any impacts that vacancies may have on public services or existing staff. The law also states that additional information may be requested if a bargaining unit reaches or exceeds a 20% vacancy rate. That rate applies to SEIU Local 1021 this year, so staff report includes additional discussion of those vacancies and our related recruitment efforts. Next slide, please. As of May 7th, 2026, the town has 42 budgeted full-time positions and 3 current vacancies for an overall vacancy rate of 7.14%. SEIU Local 1021 has 2 vacancies out of their 9 positions, which results in a vacancy rate of 22.22%. The confidential, professional, technical, and mid-management group has 1 vacancy out of 28 positions, or 3.57%. And the department head group has no current vacancies. The 2 SEIU vacancies are related to a new maintenance worker position that was added this past year and the retirement of a longtime employee. Recruitment has been underway and has generated some interviews and offers that have fallen through, but we currently have 2 conditional offer letters out, and resulting from the interviews that were recently held. The remaining vacancy is the senior engineer position in our mid-management employee group. The recruitment for that has also been ongoing, and staff is currently reviewing compensation and enhanced marketing strategies to increase our engagement and with recruitment for that classification. Next slide, please. Staff, along with our HR manager, continue to refine recruitment and retention efforts, including opportunities for expanded outreach, improved applicant communication, promotion of our benefits and flexible schedules, and also with our town manager reviewing compensation for difficult to fill classifications, as well as support for professional development. Currently, staff recommends that the town council conduct this public hearing this evening and accept the AB 2561 annual report as presented. And Adam and I can answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the council? Okay, so we'll open public comment. Do we have anyone who would like to speak?
No, no hands raised from the online attendees and no emailed public comment for this item.
All right. Well, now I'll bring it back to the council for comment. Okay. It was a wonderful report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I'm, a little concerned about some of the areas that are difficult to fill. And is it because of fewer people who are qualified to do it, or is it the pay? Do you have any sense of what might be our problem? I mean, we're
Adam
really
can probably
down.
speak to a little bit of the compensation issue, but it is a struggle that our neighboring jurisdictions have also shared within those similar classifications. The maintenance worker position is a very specialized classification that involves a lot of different work around town with our landscaping, our parks, our sewer system, mechanics. There's a lot of components to that. So finding a combination of a person that can fill that role and hopefully live close enough to commute has been difficult. And our other neighboring jurisdictions share that as well. And with the senior engineering position, that is also one that many agencies are also similarly recruiting for. And let's let town manager fill in.
Yeah, I would just say we have looked at our salary for senior engineer, and that's competitive. What we are looking at is the associate level, and as well with some of the maintenance positions. One of the strategies I think we're sort of thinking about now is also finding really well qualified individuals, but maybe starting them at a lower level with not as much experience and bringing them on board, training them up, and ultimately seeking that they get to those senior levels and stick around for a long time with the town and have room to grow. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at. And the associate level engineer, I will say, looked at that as well and think that we could do some more with respect to salary, and probably are looking at bringing that up and bring that to the council in the near term, actually, as part of our recruitment strategy.
Good. So let's see. Yes, we brought it back. So do we have a motion to accept the report?
I'll move that we accept the report officially.
Second.
Councilmember Andrews? Councilmember Beckman?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa?
Yes.
Mayor Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Right then. Next, we move on to a business item. 6A, review and discussion of proposed amendments to the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority Joint Powers Authority Agreement, including proposed new paramedic tax measure for fiscal years 27, 28 through 30, 31. And for that, the report will be coming from Fire Chief Ruben Martin.
Yeah, well, I'm going to let Chief Martin's going to give the bulk of this presentation, but I'll just do a brief introduction if I can. Thank you, Mayor Thomas and council members. Given that this is really the first significant update to the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority JPA agreement, Joint Powers Authority Agreement, in more than 40 years. The original agreement was from 1982. There's also some changes to the paramedic tax measure proposed for this year's November ballot that I think are a little bit different from prior years. We really wanted to set this up tonight as an informational presentation to the town council in anticipation of the town council taking action on both the JPA amendments and the proposed ballot measure at the June 2nd town council meeting. So in essence, we've set this up as a 2-meeting item, and we're looking forward to your questions and comments tonight. And hopefully we can just answer all of the questions that you have this evening. And my thought would be to get some direction on putting on the JPA amendment for consent at the next meeting, if that is what the council would like to do. As discussed in the background section of the staff report, the RVPA board already has approved the amendments to the JPA agreement at its April 20th, 2026 meeting. And all member agencies of the JPA, that includes Larkspur, Ross, San Anselmo, Fairfax, Kentfield, and Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection Districts and the County of Marin, will now be considering approval of the JPA amendments and the paramedic tax ballot measures over the next month. I think most are going to be doing this. The first meeting, I think Larkspur is June 3rd, and other cities will be reviewing this I think mostly in June. So I just want to thank Chief Martin in advance for being here to present this item. And I think Chief Martin, myself, Richard as well, if there's questions about the agreement itself, will be available to answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Thomas and members of the council. Chief Martin, Fire Chief with the Central Marin Fire Authority. Thank you for having me today to present the JPA amendment updates for the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, along with presenting the proposed new tax measure that goes along with the amendments of the JPA. Next slide, please. So a little history on the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority. It formed in 1982 as the communities within the greater Ross Valley realized that there was a lack in paramedic services that spanned from basically Whites Hill all the way to the Bay. With that, all the 8 main member agencies, which include the town of Corte Madera, city of Larkspur, town of Ross, town of San Anselmo, Fairfax, districts of Sleepy Hollow, Kentfield Fire Protection District, and the county of Marin for these unincorporated pockets within the greater Ross Valley, all came together and agreed upon providing paramedic services through the greater Ross Valley and introduced a tax measure back then as well. Over the years, the RVPA has functioned primarily through one major ambulance that was stationed out of the town of Ross. And I'm very familiar with that ambulance. I worked on it 25 years ago when I first came aboard as a firefighter here in Marin. So I'm very familiar with the operation. And in 1998, the town of Corte Madera, which was a member agent of the RVPA, realized that there were some extreme response times from one ambulance serving the entire area. And if that ambulance was busy, the people that would suffer would be primarily what we were seeing was a pocket within the town of Corte Madera. So the town of Corte Madera, along with the Corte Madera Fire Department and Chief Fox at the time, had the foresight of trying to introduce the ability for Corte Madera to be able to help by staffing a second ambulance. So they were able to come up with an agreement between the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority and the town of Corte Madera, where the Corte Madera Fire Department and the town became a subcontractor of the town or of the RVPA that then gained the privileges to provide paramedic services throughout the town of Corte Madera. And so that agreement stayed in place from 1998 all the way through about 2012 or so, when the amount of call volume within the entire greater Ross Valley started increasing to where now we changed some of the response boundaries of Medic 14 or what was traditionally known as the Corte Madera ambulance at the time. And then in 2012, there was a reamendment of the agreement that changed the boundary lines of who the primary responding ambulance was. So for example, prior to 2012, the ambulance here in Corte Madera would never leave the town limits until the Ross Valley paramedic was extremely busy and had no backup. Then the Corte Madera ambulance at the time would come in to assist. In 2012, an agreement was more in line with what most fire departments have, which is a mutual aid agreement, which was an automatic response that, okay, we'll change the lines in Corte Madera. You'll be responsible all the way up to about South Alicio. And that's kind of where the boundary drops kind of changed and moved around. When that was done, no one really looked at the analysis of what it did to either ambulance, whether it was both on the governance side or the fiscal responsibility side. Fast forward, we in late 2023, when I say we, is the RVPA staff, which is your fire department members and fire chiefs within the valley, and along with the RVPA, looked at trying to commission a study to look at the future governance of the RVPA on how do we now continue to strengthen the RVPA as a whole to continue to provide paramedic services to the entire Ross Valley, including Corte Madera, moving on to the next 40 to 50 years. So in 2024, the RVPA commissioned a study with Citygate Associates that looked at response times, response models, primarily looking at is the Ross ambulance the most appropriate place to be stationed, which the study said it was. And then they also looked at the financial stability of the organization. They looked at, is there some opportunities for efficiencies with procurement policies, ambulance billing policies, and so forth. What we found out throughout the study is there were a lot of discrepancies within how both ambulances operated, in the sense of there was two different tax rates. So even though you're a member of the RVPA, Corte Madera residents pay a less of a paramedic tax than members within Larkspur and the rest of the Ross Valley. So that was one discrepancy that was found. We had two different billing companies, separate billing companies with two separate billing practices, which was some inequities when you start looking at providing paramedic services equally and equitable throughout the entire valley to all of our constituents, for all of us that are paying the paramedic tax. So those are some of the things that we did. And then looking at the original JPA language, it was on a complete 2 pages, hand typed from beginning to back, very simple agreement that in today's age, that if it gets challenged as a JPA, probably wouldn't hold up very well on the legality. However, we commissioned, at that point, the RVPA board decided to go ahead and do a JPA rewrite, to go ahead and strengthen it, to add all of the legal requirements for a modern JPA. They also recommended centralizing all the finances into one central hub, with one billing policy, one procurement policy, one ambulance billing company, so that way it can be equalized throughout the entire valley. Next slide, please. So as we remembered, the RVPA, it's an 8-member JPA that's represented by a member from each member agency. So the town of Corte Madera has one of your elected bodies, council member Casisa, representing the town on the board, along with every other agency having a board member representing them. Some of the big things that we did within the JPA rewrite was identifying who the treasurer or financial officer is within the JPA. That wasn't stated in the original agreement. And then making certain votes, what was the voting threshold for it to pass? It was silent in the past. There was no real recommendation within the original JPA. And then also it's how do you elect an executive member or an executive board member to run the meetings? Traditionally, it has just been by straw poll of which of the fire chiefs wanted it to be that executive director. So now there's a formalized process on doing that. It also talks about the 2/3 threshold on expenditures that exceed 3% of the approved budget. So that way it tightens up the finances internally. And it also provides guidelines on adding new members and or removing members that are not in good standing within the organization. Next slide, please. I'm gonna have to go to my slides on this one. I don't think I can read that. So high level, on the finances, it's currently, the RVPA is financed through two different formats. One is your paramedic tax that each town and member agency puts on every 4 years. The other method of it finishing or completing its finances is through ambulance revenues. So when you transport, so it's a fee for service. When you transport someone to the hospital, their private insurance company will pay for it, or will get reimbursed through Medicare, Medi-Cal, and or co-payments. And so that's the other method. It also talks about within the new JPA is how often the tax measure is put up for a vote, which is every 4 years. It talks about what happens if a tax measure doesn't pass within one member agency. That member agency is then supposed to take it back to the next election cycle for the next available election to go ahead and have that. And then if it fails for a second time, then the RVPA board members will meet and make a determination on how to reconcile that tax measure and try to figure out how do we move forward. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that we talked about, or what I mentioned earlier, was the inequities on certain tax measures. The town of Corte Madera constituents currently pay approximately about $22 to $24 less annually or per household or per 1,000 square feet of commercial property for paramedic services, even though we're all under the same umbrella of the same JPA language, or the same JPA, I should say. So one of the goals that was given to us at staff was how do we come up to try to equalize the two tax measures over a period of time. So with our analysts, we looked at within one tax cycle or 4 years, there's an opportunity to equalize both tax measures. And so what that means is that the Corte Madera tax rate would go up at a slightly higher rate over the next 4 years until it's equalized at the end of the 30-31 tax cycle, within this next tax cycle. So for example, the rest of the members of the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority will increase their tax by approximately $4 a year per parcel, while ours go up the first year to, instead of the $4, it'll go up to $7.50 per parcel. And then the following 3 years, it'll go up to $7.75 with after the 4-year cycle, both tax measures with the rest of the Ross Valley and Corte Madera will be equalized. And one of the goals with us being equal, one of the questions brought up is, what do we do if within the RVPA, if our cost, for some reason, we are so efficient in our operation that our actual operating costs drop? We have the ability to, within the tax measure, to be able to dial it up and dial it down up to not to exceed that $7.50. And the tax measure will show up to. And then it also gives the home agencies or the member agencies. So if the RVPA exceeds revenues, anticipated revenues that exceed their reserve, their financial reserves, annual reserves, then the goal is to return dividends or return tax monies and dollars back to the member agencies that then can reinvest those dollars back into the EMS system. So whether it's into your paramedics on the fire engine or for new equipment on the ambulances and so forth. And so that's kind of the intent. And that those dividends will be seen after this 4-year tax cycle, after everything's been equalized. Next slide.
Just if I can comment on the tax measure as well, just related to non-residential properties. So currently, Corte Madera has a tax rate that applies to every 1,000 square feet of floor area of non-residential uses. And the rest of the member agencies have a lower tax rate. It's applied to every 1,500 square feet of non-residential property. And so they would also equalize and come in line with the Corte Madera current tax rate. Corte Madera's tax rate on non-residential property would not change.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that. So it's, so our tax rate's going up, but they're dropping their square footage requirement on their non-residential property. So it raises revenues on both ends of the authority. And then here on the membership, what we talked about some of the rewrite language was to be able to add a new member is 2/3 vote, to be able to remove a member 2/3. If a member wants to withdraw from the RVPA and no longer be a member of the RVPA, it'd be a 2-year notice to the board to be able to withdraw. And then termination of a member agency approval would be a 2/3 vote. So one of the challenges is if a member agency leaves is based on how the county is broken up into 5 emergency operation or exclusive operating areas, with the central zone here being called Zone C of the county. The Ross Valley Paramedic Authority is obligated to provide paramedic services to the entire area regardless of membership. So for example, if a member decides to leave or be withdrawn, we still have to provide paramedic services to that town to maintain that exclusive operating area. Otherwise, you risk the chance of opening up an area to outside competitive ambulance companies, which is typically your private ambulance bidders to come in. And so that's where I think as an RVPA board, we'd come together and try to strategize on how do we now continue to provide services to that section of town without, or that member agency or non-member agent, without disrupting those 201 rights for our ambulance services. Next slide, please. And then it also provides legal protections. They've added a lot of legal protections in there for the member agencies where the debt of the RVPA is the debt of the RVPA. It doesn't come back to the member agencies. Next slide, please. Then I already spoke about, so prior to introducing this JPA updated language, it was introduced to city managers throughout all 8 member agencies, and they provided feedback that then tweaked the language around a little bit. For example, here within the town of Corte Madera, we were able to negotiate language that member agencies would not receive dividends until we were all equalized in the tax rate, versus member agencies receiving dividends prior to the equalization of all the tax rates, because it didn't make sense to us to our tax rate to go up and other member agencies receive dividends. It just didn't seem right. Until we really truly found out what the true cost and what true dividends will be, or surplus, I should say. Dividends is the wrong word. I should say it's more of the surplus in excess revenues. Next slide, please. And so, as we mentioned at the April 20th RVPA board meeting, the RVPA board approved the new JPA language in which each member agent and member representative is taking it back to their respective councils for approval and adoption. And so at this point, staff is recommending that in order to keep the strength and the health of the JPA, that we recommend the approval of the JPA amendments and language. And with, we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. So that way, when we bring it back to you on the June 2nd meeting, we'll be able to hopefully get it approved by you. With that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for the delivery of this report and also the written report that we all received. It's very thorough. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the council? Councilmember Andrews.
Yes, the surplus, is it going to be calculated at a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis? Or would you just do it at the whole JPA and then figure out some allocation method?
My understanding, it's based on the allocation method that's already been prearranged on what percentage of revenues you bring in. So like, for example, if I believe Corte Madera is about 25 to 30% of the revenue coming in. So they would receive 25 to 30% of whatever those returns would be.
So they're going to be ignoring, let me back up. Has a cost analysis been done between your very efficient operation in the Ross firehouse?
And that's in the process now. So that was one of the recommendations, that is they're going to do a cost analysis of both ambulances to see what's more cost efficient and more cost effective.
And will include the impact of pension costs assigned to various firemen?
Yes, that's correct. And so what ends up happening right now, or what centralization of the finances, what'll happen is all the ambulance revenues and tax revenues will get shifted to the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority. And then from there, within a written contract with Central Marin Fire, those funds come back around, and included in the formula is our unfunded liabilities.
And when will that contract between Central Marin Fire and Ross Valley kick in?
That is one of the few next steps coming in. Right now, we've got a draft copy of the agreement. Till that kicks in, we have an evergreen contract that we signed in 2023 of what we get reimbursed. So typically what happens traditionally in the past is every 4 years, the contract gets renewed, because that's when the new tax measure kicks in. And so that's when we know what the new tax rates are going to be. And then we try to budget out for the next 4 years. And so from there, we'll be able to see what the true cost of the operation is, and hopefully be able to understand what that new tax rate will be. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to, within the next 2 years, be able to understand what the true costs of both operations are.
And let me see, my impression is your personnel are paid every other week.
Yes.
Will reimbursement be done every other week from JPA to Central Marin?
No, that hasn't been agreed to. Right now, we're currently getting reimbursed for whatever services quarterly.
Yeah.
So somebody has to front Central Marin Fire payroll until they get reimbursed, which can be 2 or 3 months later, currently.
Currently, correct. Like, for example, we get reimbursed for a certain percentage for the engine paramedics, which is typically about 11% or so of their salary. And we bill the RVPA quarterly for that. And then we receive payments typically within 2 to 3 weeks after that. And one of the nicest thing is the treasurer is actually within the city of Larkspur, which is a member agency, which will help with expedited payments.
Councilmember Andrews, if I can, I think right now, that's correct what Chief Martin was saying. With respect to labor, we are able, I think we do that every other week, payroll for the entire CMFA out of the towns. Essentially, we have a payroll account that you see and that gets paid. So this one thing I want to make clear, this will start in 27, 28. We're in the process of these finer points of actually having those discussions with the RVPA staff, and we'll continue those probably into the fall regarding that contract for services and some of those things about exactly how frequently we will get reimbursed for the costs. And I also want to make clear, part of that discussion, and we've already had this conversation with the county, with RVPA staff, is that we want to ensure at the outset that what our costs for services are currently are built into that contract for services. And as you know, we're paying essentially for the revenue associated with the EMS program currently is the tax measure, Corte Madera tax measure, and the ambulance billing revenue. And so that will not change in terms of what we're expecting to be reimbursed for from the RVPA as part of this next contract. But it hasn't yet been, we expect in anticipation of this starting in 27-28 fiscal year, that we'll have a contract by the end of this year, I would think, that specifies all of this.
But we will have locked ourselves into the tax rate by then. And we will have locked ourselves into this revised JPA by then.
Yes.
And if it doesn't work out to our satisfaction, we're kind of screwed.
I don't know if that's even looking. I don't think so. I think we've had good conversations. Nobody is trying to, I think from the day one, it's about being made whole as part of this transition to a centralized financial operation. So I think we're in good we're moving in the right direction so that we have all of those things in place so that we aren't screwed, so to speak, when we get to that point at 27-8 starting in 27-28.
At the onset of this entire conversation, the philosophy and the goal was no agency is going to be made off worse than they are today. So for example, if CMFA, based on ambulance revenues and the paramedic tax, collected X amount of dollars during the existing agreement, it will be no less than that for the new agreement. Now, whether it's more, that's something to be agreed upon. But the goal is, I believe what town manager was trying to say is that we're going to assure that we put into the contract what our operating cost is and make sure that we receive what those operating costs are. So we're made whole at the end of it. And so we've worked diligently in reviewing this analysis, both with the town manager and finance director Petlock, and going over and over and over and over just to make sure that our numbers were correct. So when we submitted them to the Ross Valley, we knew what our reimbursement rate was going to be. And we're feeling confident that the reimbursement that we're going to be getting for the services provided, we're going to be made whole. And then also to be able to start that new contract with the new budgets, the tax measure needs to be in place to be able to go ahead and implement that. Originally, they were trying to implement everything by July 1 of this upcoming fiscal year, but we felt that that was too much of a rush for us to try to get it right. We didn't want to make any mistakes moving forward, and we wanted to get the tax rate correct. So that way, moving forward, both CMFA and Corte Madera aren't hurt by this process. And then part of that, we were able to identify the cost or preliminarily look at the cost of both ambulances and make a request to do a cost analysis across the entire JPA to see where the efficiencies could be.
All right. Other questions? Do we have other questions from the dais? Councilmember Brazio.
Thank you. Kind of a little bit of a follow-up to Jim's. You mentioned that if revenues increase or if costs go down, we would get more. But what happens if, the economy goes bad and people stop paying for ambulance service or our costs go way up? I mean, how do we have the ability to go back in and renegotiate things, or are we kind of stuck?
I think one of the biggest concerns that we all have, not only in the fire service, but in the private ambulance business, is what's happening at the federal government level with both Medicare and Medi-Cal rates. And what do those reimbursements look like, or what will they look like moving forward? So that's a true concern. And so I think that as an RVPA board would have to look at what levers do they have, or does the board have, to then make changes within either a tax measure or ambulance billing rates or whatever other cost savings measures could be within those levers of government that we can pull to be able to try to make sure that we stay solvent.
So it's still got some fluidity to it
It
where we
does,
can
yes.
make changes. And then the other thing I just want to point out that people might have not have heard right, when you said that the tax measure would go to $7.75, you meant $7.75, not $775.
Yes, that's correct. It's $7.75 above what you're paying now. So right now, I believe it's about $84.
Mhm.
So you add another $7 on top of that.
Okay, thank you.
You have a couple. Just to clarify, the up to 750 one year and then 775 the other years, that tax rate is set by RVPA, correct? So it's out of our control.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then there's a thing in here about fiscal impact, but it's my understanding that we're picking up $500,000 or plus or minus in tax, another $1.5 million or $6 million in ambulance fees that's coming through our budget. Once that money is going to wind up going to RVPA and directly to you, correct?
Yes, that's
So that means our budget's going to drop 2 million on both sides.
No, not exactly. No, and we will discuss this when we talk about our budget upcoming. So it's not a $2 million drop. No.
I guess I'm confused on that because if we're pulling in 2 million now, that money's gone, right? And so
It will offset the contribution that we actually pay out of our general fund to CMFA.
right. So 2 million would drop from both sides of the balance sheet or the income statement, right? It's revenue and expense side of it.
what it'll show is it'll show a revenue in the CMFA line item,
Right.
which will be, I guess, less of an expenditure on the Corte Madera side for a contribution. To
Right. So basically our budget drops 2 million on both sides.
Oh, I see. In terms of revenues and expenditures, you're
Yes.
saying.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Exactly.
We did buy, I think, a new ambulance last year. I can't remember if that's delivered yet. Is that factored into any of this?
I believe we did factor, part of it was we were going to maintain ownership of that ambulance, and then eventually get reimbursed for it by RVPA.
Okay. And then on the dividends, if I can remember, the dividends, no dividends would be issued until after Corte Madera does the catch up, right?
That's correct. So after the 30/31 tax cycle ends, then, so the 32/33 tax cycle, then their member agencies will be eligible if there's any surplus in
Okay.
revenue.
And then one last question. The JPA is pretty much locked in, right? So if somebody from council wanted to change it for any reason, it's locked in.
No, it still has to be approved by each member agency.
No, that part I got. But what I'm saying is if all of a sudden somebody goes, hey, I don't think we should be paying $7.50. It should be $7, or they want to change some kind of verbiage in the JPA. We don't have the ability to change that, right?
So the way I think the process would work, if there was something that the council said just can't live with here, it would be a sort of an action by the council not to approve the JPA amendment, which would have then ramifications back at RVPA, if that's what you're asking.
Right. But I'm back thinking we're almost locked into this because it would have to, right now you have other member agencies that are approving this. So if we sat there saying we want to change something, it'd have to go back to the RVPA board.
Correct.
They would have to decide whether they want to change it.
Correct.
And from there, if they did accept those changes, then it would have to go back out to all those other agencies. So in a sense, we're locked into this.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Most of my questions have already been asked. Good questions from council members. Small governance question. Removal can be voted on by 2/3 majority for good cause. How is good cause defined? And I only ask because I'm seeing other JPAs that I sit on get a little spicier than I would have hoped, and we're realizing that these types of things need to be well clarified in advance.
I think part of it would be the delinquency and being able to pass a paramedic tax over several tax cycles and just throwing your hands up and saying, screw it. We're going to just do it. We're going to get services no matter what. And I don't care. They may then go, you know what? You're out. You need to figure out how to be assessed potentially on if you still want paramedic services.
Got it. Thank you.
And Councilmember Casissa had another question.
Yeah, can you just explain on the billing fees for the ambulance side? Because if I can remember, I think the way you bill or Central Marine Fire bills is differently
Yes,
than the way the county bills. If I can remember, we're picking up more revenue.
that's correct. So right now, when I mentioned earlier that there's two different billing philosophies, so to speak. The billing philosophy here is it's a fee for service. We pay a paramedic tax to be able to guarantee that there's paramedics sitting here ready to respond when the 911 tones go off. I hate using the term insurance company in the fire service, but that's the easiest way for the public to understand it, is your tax measure is somewhat of an insurance policy to make sure I've got a paramedic next door to respond. Once Mr. or Mrs. Smith calls, we respond to them, and then we would bill that one individual for fee for service, which would typically go in an insurance claim. So we would bill their insurance company. Their insurance company would then pay whatever portion they agree upon, whatever their policy is. And then the patient would then have a copay. Whatever your copay is, that copay could be $50 all the way up to $700, $800, $1,000, whatever it is, based on the type of insurance policy you purchase as a consumer. Here at Central Marin Fire, we will bill your insurance company, and then we will do everything we possibly can to collect a copay. When there's the inability to pay, then a decision is made internally with staff for hardships, income related issues. They're on a fixed income. We try to set up a payment plan if we can with them. And if it's come to the point where after exhausted all options of where they can't pay, then we consider it payment in full. So we decide not to take anyone into third-party collections. The Ross Valley's philosophy is a little bit different. Their philosophy is, I pick you up, I give you a ride, whether you give me insurance information or not, I don't care. You're getting a ride to the hospital. So they don't pick up copays. We can send you what looks like to the person what looks like a bill, but it's actually requesting insurance information. And for you, as the person who was transported decides to round can it and put it in the garbage, after about 12 months or so, it's written off as bad debt. And so at that point, in our opinion, there's a lot of revenue being left on the table at the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, where by changing their billing policy to match our billing policy, they're able to capture more revenue coming in to be able for the operation to be more sustainable. And that's the difference of the two billing policies right now. So being able to have the same billing policy would be fantastic, because what hurts us is within the two different ambulance models is if we pick up a patient from, say, San Anselmo, then the RVPA billing policy kicks in. Hence why we have an agreement with the RVPA for ALS backup right now, so we can recoup as much of our cost recovery as we possibly can. Long answer to a short question. All good stuff.
It works that way. In the event that we were discussing what happens in the event of the ballot measure not passing in a particular jurisdiction. So they take it back to their voters a second time. I'm assuming it is the same measure that second time.
The same measure.
Okay. And then if it does not pass, then RVPA figures out how to reconcile the money they're not getting. Is that what
That's my understanding, is the board will meet again in a special session to try to figure out, okay, jurisdiction X didn't pass their tax measure on 2 consecutive cycles. Do we have them put it on a third, or what are we doing here differently as an RVPA? Do we need to go out and campaign better? What are our measures of getting this information out there?
Right. But they wouldn't at that point decide, well, maybe we need to rewrite this to make it something that can pass.
I don't know. I don't know if they would rewrite it. I think it comes back to more of how are you campaigning and how are you now communicating to the voter the importance of what this tax measure is and what it supplies. So for example, 4 years ago, all 8 member agencies passed a tax measure at an average of about 84% with zero campaigning. In my entire 25 years here in the county, I believe I recall one tax measure not passing. And I believe it may have been Sleepy Hollow, and they put it right back on to the next tax measure and it got passed.
2010, it failed here in town. We had to go back for 2011.
Okay. Yeah, I was not
That's it.
aware of that. Thank you.
And this may not be even important to understand, but I don't know, maybe it is why was Corte Madera's rate lower for some in particular reason, or just was it some sort of clerical error or?
To be honest, I believe it was a clerical error where it was never increased through the annual CPI. So when typically you do a tax measure for 4 years, it tells you every year what your escalators are going to be and what your dollar amount is. I believe we went through 2 tax cycles without it being increased. And then in 2022, we actually put it back on the ballot to try to now increase it because I was seeing the gap from the RVPA tax and ours getting wider. And so I started adding $3 escalator to try to catch up with the CPI.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I was just curious about that. Were we doing something being more efficient but no, it was just a little bit of an oversight. All right, then. So is everybody on the dais satisfied with their questions? All right, then we'll open it up to public comment on this item.
We do not have any public comment from our attendees online, nor do we have any public comment from anyone via email.
All right, and seeing none in the room, I'll bring it back for council comments, or if something else.
One piece of direction, and we didn't ask for any action here tonight from the council, but it would be helpful. My intention would be if the council felt like we had a full discussion this evening, we could bring the JPA amendment, I believe, back on the consent calendar for the next meeting, and then just focus on the ballot measure, which would be I believe, a public hearing item.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, business item. Oh, sorry, I should be looking at our town clerk.
You put it on the consent calendar. I'm going to ask it to be pulled.
Okay.
You better.
Well, that's good to know. I'm asking the question.
Okay. So may we have some discussion of the tax this evening? All right. Because it sounds like that's the piece of it you're concerned about as far as being, whether we put it on the ballot or not.
No, well, first of all, I would want to see a true cost analysis before we put it on the ballot. However, I realize that it's so late in the game, we're going to have to put something on the ballot just so that we keep functioning, which is very frustrating. Realize that. And as I said, until I get a good cost analysis of Central Marin versus the county fire, I can't really opine one way or another as to whether the tax measure is fair or unfair. I would expect Larkspur and ourselves have basically the same tax because we're being serviced by the same organization. But going from that organization to Ross and all the other jurisdictions that are serviced by the county, I don't know whether we should, we should be $5 below the county, and the county should be, whatever, until we see a detailed costs analysis. Oh,
So just two things with that. Can you just talk again about the cost analysis? Because I think you said that's probably a couple of years out, right? And then the second part, I think there's fear, Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, that our tax is going, it's more than doubling. Are we then basically subsidizing all the other jurisdictions within RVPA?
So currently the tax rate is about $22 to $24 less than our other member agency, which is Larkspur. So they're paying more taxes for us. It's still being serviced. The rest of the Ross Valley is at the higher tax rate as well. I don't feel like it is subsidizing them because all of the revenues and taxes that will be collected are coming back as a fee for service with a contract within the Central Marin Fire. So the goal is, for example, if we generate 2.1 million on average here, the goal is to get a minimum of 2.1 million back from the RVPA. So we're not saying that it is a subsidizing going up the valley. What it is, I think it's creating some efficiencies and in procurement and the finances with one operation, one hub, without it being disfragmented on running two different models. The other thing to think about is that we as Corte Madera operate an ambulance and paramedics at the luxury of the RVPA, since they have the exclusive operating area. And they technically, and I don't think this will ever happen, they can go, thank you, Corte Madera, thank you, Central Marin, but we're going to run our own operation at the end of the day. And that's where it comes down to the ambulance 201 rights, which is under Health and Human Services Code or Health and Safety Code section .201, which talks about exclusivity. That basically means that any ambulance operator, whether private or public, was operating in a certain area prior to 1981, you have exclusive operating rights, meaning no one else can come in and try to take a franchise right from you. However, if you were not operating under that, then the county that you work in operates and owns that franchise in that exclusive operating area. RVPA is kind of in this little wiggle gray area because they were formed in 1982, which is after those 201 rights. However, they've been working within this entire emergency op area unopposed and unchallenged, just grandfathered in by the county. Why? Because we're providing such a great service combined as a whole. And I think as an RVPA, we need to look at it as one giant collective agency that's providing paramedic services to all the constituents up and down the valley equally and the best possible way we possibly can. And so that's how we look at it as fire chiefs, is can we still continue to provide great, excellent patient care, patient transport, and provide these services to our constituents when they need them. And that's how we view it. We don't really look at it as one subsidizing the other.
Can we go back to the slide that shows what we're paying now and what the increase will look like? And the reason is that I don't want the public to get the idea that I just heard that we were paying 50% more, but I'm not seeing that. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding what I'm looking at. So it's showing the current cycle. The current cycle 26-27, Corte Madera's rate is $87 and increasing. Oh, thank you.
From Jim.
Oh,
So
from
it'll
Jim.
be
Okay.
increasing to $94.50.
To $94.50. So that's not a 50% increase.
No.
When we go,
No.
and at no point is the increase that high. So I just want to understand, I just want the public to understand that it's not a giant increase. The catch up rates, and then they will start to, those catch-up dollars diminish over time as we get closer to and closer to parity. Also, the other thing to think of is that it's an up to number. It's not guaranteed that it's even going to be
That high.
that high, which is actually kind of low. So anyway, I just want the public to be very clear about that because, you know, that's what they're basing their support on and also what I would be basing my support on. So yes, so before I go on all my comments, I think, did everybody else have their comments? Okay. Well, the only other thing I want to say is that I am always in favor of solidifying processes and, making this more of a single payment system, centralizing finances, centralized billing. I think it's a good thing to have roles defined more clearly and, the structure of the organization more specific. And it makes sense to me, I don't have any discomfort with this because it is an up to number as opposed to a specific amount. And that specific amount in itself is not an enormous increase. Also, as we look at JPAs and how complicated they can be, I think it's a good thing if we ever want to do analysis apples to apples. I think it's also really important that we're all paying the same thing. I think it's harder when it's all over the place and, it's just this JPA. I served a little bit of time on fire last year and this year, and it's just, and, I went through the Citygate report and there were just so many things that were just hazy. And so I'm really encouraged to see that things are being the lines are being more defined. So, I'm actually feeling positive about this change. So that's my.
So given that, I'm okay moving this forward. I think we just need to keep a closer eye on some of these operational aspects going forward, like the billing, those types of items. One thing I'll just note, because here in RVPA, and they come out with data, just to put this in perspective, in 2025, Medic 14 alone had almost 2,300 runs. Okay. About 40% of those, 39%, are just in Corte Madera. Everything else is covering the rest of the valley. Medic 18, it's the same type thing. So I think it's what Chief Martin is saying. RVPA is working really well because there are no boundaries. They're going where they need to go, and everybody's covering everybody else. I know a couple of years ago, I went on a run with Engine 16 out in San Quentin. Medic 14 showed up, then Medic 18 showed up, two different runs on medical. The rest of the valley was being covered either by San Rafael, the county, Southern Marin. So it's everybody helping everybody else out. But I think it's important to note that because they just do great work. And if you can, just one more comment, if you can maybe just speak to it, I couldn't make it, but I think last Thursday night was a survivors dinner. Can you just talk just for a couple minutes on what that is, just really quick?
Sure. So every year, our local EMS agency that manages all the paramedics throughout the county puts on a survivors reunion dinner and gala. So basically, they look at cases throughout the county where the paramedics had a life and death impact and saved a life, where they now reunite the person who had the medical emergency or traumatic injury with the paramedics that were part of their survival. Last Thursday was the county celebration. We had 3 members of our organization celebrated as part of that. We had Captain Jordan Russell, firefighter Kelly Bennett, and engineer paramedic TJ Quadros that were part of the call on the engine company that provided care for this person. And just a few details, it was a female in her 30s that accidentally forgot to put her car in park. She got out and her vehicle rolled over her. On the surface, she seemed fine, but based on the great patient assessment and asking the right questions and understanding the mechanism of that injury, they were able to identify some internal injuries that probably wouldn't have been seen otherwise based on their level of training. So they were able to get this young lady to definitive care where she walked out and can now have a productive life. So that's one example. A couple, 2 years ago, there was another example where we had 3 more members that were part of that, where they recognized a significant heart arrhythmia in a young 16-year-old lacrosse player. And she's a Corte Madera resident. And that incident spurred a genetic testing that identified 2 other members in her family that had the same genetic sequencing that would have had the same traumatic cardiac arrest. So it's a positive thing. And we hear during the RVP in our meetings, they're always coming in and telling these good stories of the good work of the men and women, the paramedics that work for the RVPA, for our agencies that are doing on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks. And again, I've heard some of those survivors. It just really hits home because you realize the importance of the work that RVPA is doing. It just really hits home. So thanks.
Thank you. Oh, we've read everybody.
Well, I'd like, let me see, to be able to argue against the suspicion that we're going to be subsidizing other jurisdictions. I would like to see the surplus be allocated by jurisdiction where that reflects the revenue generated by the jurisdiction and the cost of the jurisdiction. At the very least, we need to be able to have Central Marin versus the county fire because those are the 2 service providers. So
If I can try to bring back at the June 2nd meeting some real high level analysis that was pre-done on try to come up with these numbers on what our consultant used to come up with the tax measure, because it'll show what the costs of the 2 ambulances are and
okay,
what's being proposed as reimbursements.
thank you.
So I will be in favor of moving forward. And, here's why. This is incredibly complicated. It is obviously not without risk, but there's also risk to the status quo. There's risk to operational inefficiencies as they exist now. And this is a critical service where I think that is it. I think that can actually be dangerous. I also think that there are really important governance reforms that are embedded within this JPA amendment. So I think that's a good thing, not just for Corte Madera residents, but for all of the folks that rely on this JPA. I think my bigger concern here is the rapidly escalating cost of providing these services, which I think is tied to near runaway inflation in the healthcare industry more broadly. And I think, but the reality is we have to buy the equipment that is required to provide these. I mean, we just bought an ambulance, right? We know how much this costs, but we have to do that. And I think it gives you heartburn when you look at the way these costs are escalating and you feel like you're just getting dragged along. But at the same time, these are macroeconomic problems that we in Corte Madera cannot dodge by just refusing to play ball. So that's why I support moving forward with this.
Thank you. And one thing, if I can, I also support moving forward, but I just want to confirm that the others will be using our billing system and our ability to collect funds rather than theirs. I mean, they're going to convert to the best practices of, is that the way it works? That if
That's
they're,
my understanding, is they're taking the best of both and coming up with one policy.
And ultimately, though, that's going to be an RVPA board will have to set that policy. And so at the board level, it becomes really important that we advocate for that.
and do you think the board is going to go there, Fred? If I could ask my fellow council.
I can't tell you because it hasn't come before the board yet.
Haven't talked about it yet.
No, I think that's the work that needs to be done in the upcoming year is all the bylaws, the operational aspects, the billing, all that work needs to be done, but they do have a great consultant
Yes.
on board, and she's been on board for like the last year now or so, I
She's
think.
been with us for about 2 years.
Yeah, and so she knows this stuff, and she's great. She knows it inside it. She's
Sounds
top
good.
notch.
Cool. I like it.
Okay, well, that, we've been on this how long? Yeah, we did do public comment. Okay. Um,
Thank you. That's helpful. Appreciate the comments.
you. All right, so that's just that was our informational.
Absolutely. We'll be bringing this back for council consideration and action at the next meeting.
Okay, and just before we close, is there anything else that anyone from council would like to be answered on the June 2nd?
And I will say staff is both Chief Martin, myself, Chris Petlog, we're happy to sit down with Councilmember Andrews in between and have a conversation about those costs as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So no vote?
No, it's just informational. It's like a presentation.
Thanks, Ruben.
Here. All right, then. So we move on to we get
From fire to flood.
yeah, really. We get the band. We get the whole band. This is great.
Like
The ensemble. So we move on to item 6B, receive progress report on flood recovery preparedness actions. And we'll have the report from
It's a joint effort. This is another discussion item. It's really intended to provide the council, members of the public who may be listening, or since the members of the public are in our audience here today, but really with we'll make it brief, a brief update on where we are in our flood response and mitigation efforts, with a particular focus on our preparedness plans moving forward over the next 6 months. Just again, I think also an important opportunity to ensure we continue to hear from the council, public, our community regarding priorities, so that we're just making sure we're moving forward and we're on the same page with all those involved. And also just want to recognize that this is the team really right here. We have that we've been working on this and meeting. And so just showing that we have the top, our leadership in our organization focused on this. And so thank Chris Good, our Public Works Director, and Amy Lyle, Community Development Director, and Phoebe Golden, Climate Adaptation and Action Coordinator, for continuing to move us forward so we're better prepared for flooding going ahead. Thanks. I'll hand it off to, I think Phoebe's starting this, so thank you.
Thank you, Adam, and good evening, Town Council. If we go to the next slide, please, Verena. Right, so the agenda for this presentation, we're going to go over the response to the January flooding, a bit of a recap there, some of the recovery actions that staff have been taking since then, and how staff are preparing for the next flood event in the short term, and then also give an update on where we are in terms of the long-term adaptation strategies. So next slide, go ahead and jump into the flood response and recovery. So this slide is a bit of a recap of the town's immediate response to the flooding event, which we've covered previously, so I won't go into much detail. But there is a lot of detail in the after action report, which was included as an attachment to the staff report. And that covers the sequence of response actions that DPW took during and after the flood event, sort of by day, as well as the recovery support that the town provided, including the dumpsters for residents, the building division pop-ups in the neighborhood, and the SBA Disaster Loan Outreach Center that was hosted at Town Hall. Next slide. And then, of course, as you all are aware, as many or all of you attended this flood recovery workshop that the flood board and staff hosted at the Cove School at the end of January to discuss the flood event, the town's response, and next steps. And we had really great participation at this event. There were about 80 attendees. Many of those provided comments in person. We also had comments via email. feedback through the map activity and folks filling out the flood damage estimate form, which was circulated online for several weeks. And there are also paper copies at the workshop. So all of that yielded some really helpful feedback from the community, and staff have developed summary documents for both the workshop feedback and the flood damage estimate form responses to really make sure that we capture and document all of that feedback. And those documents were linked in the staff report. They're available on the town website, and they're also sent out to the community through the town newsletter and our shoreline email list in March. Thank you. So that community feedback directly fed into these actions that staff intend to pursue over the next 6 months or so to improve preparedness for the next King Tide event. We know we're expecting one around Thanksgiving and then an even higher one around Christmas Eve, Christmas Day this year. So the focus in these steps is really on improving communication and preparation, which is a lot of what we heard from the community. And these are also identified in more detail in the after action report. But just to get into these ones here, the first is developing a communications playbook. So that's in progress. This document is intended to provide really clear and detailed guidance for staff on how and when to communicate with the public, community groups, and our partner agencies in advance of these expected flooding events, as well as throughout the events if they do materialize and are as severe as expected. So it will include some of the suggestions that we heard at the workshop, like using electronic message boards and A-frames out in our shoreline neighborhoods. And the goal here is really to make sure that the community is informed and prepared for these events. We also heard and asked for the community for better information on how homeowners can prepare for flooding. And so we'll be bringing on a summer volunteer next week, actually, a College of Marin environmental science student who's going to be helping us with some of this outreach materials, as well as developing the concept of a flood preparedness fair, which was brought up at the workshop. And then building staff are also working on some educational materials around home raising and providing clear steps and guidance for residents who wish to raise their house out of the flood zone. And Amy will be talking a little bit more about that strategy later on. But for now, I'll turn it over to Chris to talk more about the other bullets.
Thanks, Phoebe. So just moving down the list, exploring an internal policy to improve on-call staffing during flooding. As we saw on January 3rd, the flooding has been happening in recent years during the holidays. So our typical practice is to have one maintenance staff member on call 24/7. Of course, during emergencies, they'll call in others, but there's no guarantee that everyone is not or is in town and available. So we're hoping to look at options, internal policy options to have more staff members available during those times, particularly when we see potential flooding occurring. Stockpiling more sandbags, sand and other emergency flood control supplies. Typically, we keep a lot of that at Paradise Pump Station, and this year it was just unfortunate timing that the pump station was under construction and a lot of that material had been moved or gotten rid of. So we're planning to take a close look there and see, how much we can store and try and make some improvements. So that's in progress. Using physical barriers to close roads in Mariner Cove. This is, we heard this from a lot of people. Our town staff will close the roads with cones, but people can still drive around, and then people tend to drive through the flooded waters and create wakes that can cause further damage to residents. So we've already actually purchased some barriers that are easy to set up and they're easy to move for emergency services. So I think that should help in future flooding events. And then implementing flood mitigation measures at the courtyard. Plan to go into this a little more detail in the next slide. So next is the Public Works Corporation yard recovery. So It's in progress right now. We're actually near completion. But so far what's been completed is we had a company move all the items and equipment out of the building. And then we brought in a temporary office trailer to accommodate our maintenance staff. We did demolition and asbestos abatement. You can see in the picture on the right, we removed 4 feet of all the internal walls to remove the damaged drywall. And unfortunately, it all had some amount of asbestos in it, so it all had to be abated. So that added some additional cost and complexity to the work. And then we separately hired an electrician to raise all the power outlets in the building to at least 2 feet, just as a safety precaution for future floods, because of some of them were lower than they should have been. And then remaining work. So the building restorations kind of underway. They're actually they should be done tomorrow. So that includes reinstalling the drywall, doing epoxy flooring, replacing cabinets and fixtures, as well as ordering replacement appliances and office furniture that was all damaged in the flood. So that's all underway. And then we'll also start moving all the items back into the building that were in storage, and then remove the temporary office trailer. So that's expected in the next week or two. And then finally, I mentioned this in the last slide, but investigate and implement flood mitigation measures to reduce impacts of a future flood. One item we already took care of, as you can see in this picture, there's some flood vents very low to the ground there. We had the contractor raise those up so water can't just come pouring in from the outside. We're going to look at potentially water-filled bladders that could be set up around the entrances of the building to keep floodwaters out. And then I think I mentioned this before as well, but we have an old vehicle lift that's no longer in use, but groundwater is able to get into the building through there. So we're going to look at abandoning that and sealing it up, hopefully this year. So those are just some of the mitigation measures we're looking at, and hopefully we'll start soon. Next slide. So here's just some pictures of kind of the work underway. On the left, you can see all the drywall was removed, and actually we found some water damage in the wall, so we had to repair that as well. And then on the right, the guys are also just installing drywall in the old break room. So they're almost done with all that work, which is great. Next slide. So moving on to some long-term adaptation. So in addition to all the short-term preparedness we've discussed, the flood event earlier this year emphasized the need for longer-term protection measures in the shoreline neighborhoods. So going back to the end of the shoreline adaptation engagement effort in 2024, these were the priorities informed by community feedback that staff presented to council in October 2024. I can just quickly go through them, but the priority project identified through that effort was reinforcing the Marina Village flood berm. One of the reasons we selected that, besides just the entrance from the residents there, was that besides the potential flooding in the neighborhood itself, it could also cause flooding down San Clemente Drive, Highway 101, and more widespread flooding beyond that. So it's definitely an important area to protect. So that's one of our higher priority projects we're working on. Besides that, implementing storm drain infrastructure priorities from the storm drain master plan. We already have one project complete, and we're going to be continuing to push out projects every year to try and complete some of that work. We're going to explore FEMA funding for raising homes, identify priority areas in Mariner Cove, and start preliminary engineering and environmental constraints. That will likely be kind of after Marina Village, considering the amount of staff time and cost that will include, but that's kind of the next priority. We'll continue to collaborate with regional agencies, such as the county, Caltrans, BCDC, CDFW, and Marin Audubon on possible projects. We know around Lucky Drive, that flooding can only be dealt with through a multi-jurisdictional effort. So, working with them to take a look at those options. And then we'll continue to pursue potential funding opportunities, which goes into more detail on the next slide. So the Marina Village Flood Burn project we haven't really been able to dive into the design yet because we haven't identified funding. In fall of 2024, the town was selected for the FEMA FMA grant. Since then, we've responded to 5 requests for information from FEMA, but we still have no timeline on when this funding may be awarded. There was some very recent news that they may be kind of reviving the applications from that year and taking another look. So we'll see if anything comes out of that. Besides that, we've applied to several state grants from the Coastal Conservancy and Ocean Protection Council, but neither of those were successful. And both responses indicated that the project needed to be identified in a regional shoreline adaptation plan required by SB 272. So the last bullet on this list is also kind of exploring potential for a countywide RSAP to comply with this state requirement. So we're going to be looking at that as well, and that may open the door to some additional grant opportunities. And then finally, we're developing an application for the Marin County Foundation Building Resilient Communities Initiative Sea Level Rise Small Grant Pilot Program, which is a mouthful. But they're offering between 100 and 250,000 kind of just to get projects started, which is kind of exactly what we're looking for. So we'll be submitting that application soon if we haven't already. And hopefully that will give us some additional money to kind of do at least some initial design work on the project. And then in the meantime, we have $200,000 budgeted to get started. So we're planning to initiate a topographic and property boundary survey. We've already begun. We requested proposals from our on-call design consultants. Received one proposal and it looks good. And so we're in negotiations with them and that could start soon. So that would kind of be the first step. And then if we get this MCF grant, that would allow us to do some additional design work, looking at environmental constraints and potentially looking at some concepts and alternatives. So just kind of, we're at least getting started and hopefully we'll identify some additional grant funding to let us complete the design for that project.
Do you have anything to add to that, Phoebe? That was a very recent development, was the Marine Community Foundation grant opportunity. We've had some good meetings. I think we're all encouraged by the fact that they've asked us to apply. And so hopefully we're identifying a scope in the next, it's really needs to be used by, I think, the next 13 months or 12 to 13 months. So we're identifying the scope of what we could use that money for. And again, crossing fingers and hopeful that that will allow us to get started, and which is essentially what we were hoping for when we started this year at the work plan and whatnot. So sorry. Back to you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think next slide is pass off to Amy.
Yeah. Thank you. So aside from all the public infrastructure components, we also have private property, and we need to do a better job of just helping our private property owners adapt and become more resilient. So we're also making some efforts to, one, streamline the process, but also just provide more information about how to raise your home, how much does it cost, what does a sample application look like, what contractors are engaged in this work. We, as you know, have a good chunk of our town in the floodplain. So it's, and there's some data in your staff report too that speaks to this, but it's pretty significant. And we do have a fair number of homes that have been raised. Most of the time, this is due to their own remodel plans, and they work this into the budget, and their contractor advises them to raise the home. We do have some that just get triggered by our threshold, and we have to require them to raise their home. And then we have a whole slew of other folks that try not to got anywhere near that threshold, so they don't have to spend the money. Because we do have, next slide, please. Just spatially, if you look, we have, obviously the east side has been more impacted, but we also have properties even on Madera that are technically in the floodplain, but are on cement slab, and it's very costly and difficult to raise your home. And if you haven't experienced any flooding in the 30 years you've been there, it's a very hard case to make. So we need to do a better job of streamlining, making things easy, and really providing a better just support around the cost estimates, because usually they are working with a private contractor or someone who works in raising homes. So that's really where the efforts heading as far as the permitting. As you know, we've done a couple zoning ordinances to help streamline the design review, allow for some small additions, and without having to trigger design review, some standards for just the type of facade and things of that sort. So, and then we had a private homeowner apply for a zoning change for everyone around decks along Golden Hide Passage, being able to just expand those decks beyond what we would normally allow, because that's basically the only yard space they have on that particular street on the Bayside. So we're going to continue to work on those things and are open to feedback on these efforts as well. And so with that, I'll hand it back to Phoebe to close out the presentation. Or is that it? Okay, well, I'll just close out. The next slide, please, Lorena. So we do have a lot of information on the website. Here's a couple QR codes that will go directly to those pages. And then also attached to your staff report is the after action report that Chris prepared, and really gives a good synopsis of the event itself. And I think it was noted that we have all the damage assessments and the survey results on the webpage as well. So we're just going to be able to keep providing resources on this page, and we'll be doing more email blasts as things get added.
If I can, just wanted to add one piece is that when we're doing the survey work as well, which I think is really important on in Mariner Cove, I'm sorry, in Marina Village. And in particular, there's some property boundaries that sort of, as we look closer on it, it's not clear if the berm is sort of partially on private property or if it's on public property and whatnot. So I think it's really critical that we get that information. That's why we're doing it. But we're trying to focus our effort, at least initially, or emphasize and start the effort around Harbor Drive so that we get the information in that area where the levee overtopped, and then can really start the work with Richard and others about how do we work with the property owner to sort of reinforce very temporary, but add some sandbags potentially to the berm behind those properties, so we don't have the same issue occur again in the future or in the very near term next year. So that's where we're focusing the most immediate next steps and with respect to the surveying work. But again, just wanted to provide an update and see if there was any comments or suggestions or feedback for the group and the team.
Great. Thank you all very much, and appreciate the work you've been doing. Do we have any questions from the dais? Yes, one from Ms. Bravazio.
You all, I was at that big meeting at the Cove and people were so happy that the town was really taking it seriously and doing all that. But, so I really appreciate all you're doing. I know it's a ton of work. There's two areas I'm really concerned about and they haven't really been mentioned much. And I know it's because you've got so many other important things, but one of the things that came up was the quality of our communication system. I know we have Nixle and so forth from the county, but up until recently, the town had a radio station and it was the place that you would go. You would go sit in your driveway and turn on your car if you didn't have power. So you could listen and find out what was going on. And it was, I don't know if it was volunteer run or fire department run. I wasn't involved in it, but there would just be this long message. Here's what's happening. These roads are closed. These roads are open. And it was a really informative way that people could find out what was going on. And I think we heard a lot about that. Like, how do we know what roads are closed? How do we know that? And I did a little research in it. You can get a low powered FM radio station that goes for 3 to 5 miles radius for about $10,000 through the FCC. So it's not that expensive. Or you can actually integrate with the NOAA, the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, and they can provide a radio service for us. And it's also highly recommended that even small towns have really loud sirens for when the power all goes out and if it's an earthquake or whatever, so that we can really reach people. Oh, am I supposed to be asking questions? So my question is, what have we done with emergency communications considerations related to this issue? And who's on that?
Well, I can start. So one of the items on the list was the communications playbook we're working on, and that's more of an internal document, but it's kind of shaping how, under what scenarios do we do certain outreach to the community and what methods. We're mainly focusing on, we have newsletters we can reach out to in social media, do that sort of outreach. If we expect a certain tide, I think we're aiming at 7.5 feet or potential for a storm and a high tide, we'll then look at more like physical A-frames, posters, changeable message boards to like set them up so they're, the public will see coming in and out of the neighborhood and get that notice. As we haven't really looked into radio, I believe we discussed this with Ruben and he said the equipment that they used to have is gone now. So if we were going to look at that option, it would be scratch.
It would be expensive to re-up a big regular AM station like we had before. It's really a shame that we let it go. But the possibility of the low-powered FM, or you can even use the internet. But the problem is, if the power goes out and people don't have phones charged, and nobody has landlines anymore, we've sort of put ourselves in the dark. So radio becomes like the old-fashioned way we used to get news, and we go back to it again. And you know what? It doesn't really matter as long as people know where to go, as long as they have something where they can get information more than you can put on one of those little signs, though. It's got to have some.
I think one of the things, so part of this communications playbook is also reinforcing our communications in terms of what's happening on the ground with CMPA for Nixle alerts, which is they're really focused on traffic, road closures, things like that are happening in town and where to go, where not to go. And also, Alert Marin is a little bit larger of an issue, certainly like a Highway 101 closing. We are developing those contacts. And that was one of the things that came out of the countywide after action report was need to have better sort of county to local communications and make sure that we have anything we want to send up to them, we can. We know who to contact in an emergency. So those things are in the works. I really think something like a radio station, the problem with that is like who's actually staffing that and giving out the correct information. And it's got to be coordinated with the police and fire and the emergency responders. And so it's
Kind of
more
our
than,
job to do that.
what's that?
I think it's kind of our job to do that,
Well,
to make sure that we are communicating effectively to
Understood.
all of the residents if we can.
No,
Because we don't know what the next emergency is going to be. We don't know whether it's flood, fire,
well, we're talking
earthquake,
specifically about
shooters,
flood as part of this project. And so I totally agree. And I just, I think it's going to have to be an emergency responder who's manning that
Yeah, so
station. If
I'm not
that's-
looking for a solution right now. I just am hoping that we have a plan to pursue it. I mean, maybe we need to bring in a consultant who's going to tell us how can we better reach our community in the event of an emergency since we don't have the old capabilities that we used to have. I just think we need to, maybe it's for a work plan discussion mid-year or something, but I just think it should be on our radar somewhere.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions?
I just have,
Oh,
Well, my question is I know when I, commute into the city almost every day, so I'm used to seeing signs pop up saying high winds, when you approach the bridge and so on. Do we have any sort of temporary signage capability there where, you drag it out next to, across from the chip station and folks who go by there can say, hey, Harbor Drive's flooded or whatever, so.
Yeah, we purchased, I believe we have 2 changeable message boards that you can tow out and put next to the road and program whatever message you want in them. So we definitely use those for future events.
okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, just 2 quick questions. I keep calling it the co-op yard. I don't know why I get the op part in there. Do you know how much that's costing to fix? And we're not getting any federal or state funding for that, correct?
For the corporation yard, our initial estimate was about $500,000, and it's looking like it's going to be close to that right now. So, and as of now, we haven't identified any emergency funding for reimbursement. So,
Okay. And then just one last comment on the communication part. I'll send it to you, Adam. I'll send it to all you guys also. Because I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago, OEM, I was able to get data on how many residents in Corte Madera are on Alert Marin. So I think that's just another key piece because it just seemed like the number was kind of low. I can't remember exactly what it was, but something like that. Maybe what we should do 2 things. Either one, do a big push to see if we can get more people on Alert Marin. And again, I'm just not looking at flooding because they also broke it down, I think, by multifamily apartment buildings, which I was just thinking homes, not multifamily. And the other thing, just to get it out there, I was even thinking one time if we could do like a friendly competition with maybe Larkspur to see who can get the higher, just something friendly. It spurs, I think, motivation, and it gets people thinking about this stuff. I was even trying to figure out if we could do it through MCCMC and go more countywide with other cities. But again, just something friendly, a little better, something like that. I think it'll just encourage people and it'll just motivate that part of it.
Like who's prepared? I like that. So one more, I'm sorry.
Oh, question? Needs to be a question. You have another question?
Okay, I guess I'll wait.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have no more questions down here. All right, then, I am going to open, public comment.
Okay. We have a hand raised from Roy Wolford, and Roy Wolford did provide a comment earlier today, which was sent to council and was added to the website.
Go ahead.
And then we also have a hand raised from Bob Bundy.
Okay.
Good evening. Over the past 4 years, I prepared and shared detailed information via email and in meetings with neighbors, council members, town staff, and several flood board members regarding tidal flooding impacts and potential protection measures. In one of those emails, I included a cost-benefit comparison table outlining 6 solution options and 6 evaluation features, providing a concise summary of the advantages and limitations of each approach. And I'll cover that in a little bit if I have enough time. My objective has been to identify actionable, cost-effective, durable, and low-maintenance solutions. Importantly, individual property-level measures do not protect infrastructure. At this time, the only solution that fully protects infrastructures and structure, properties, and health and safety is a continuous perimeter berm with floodgates and a pumping system. Given that a town scale system that will take time to plan and construct, residents urgently need interim guidance on measures that are compatible with future infrastructure. There seems to be a void for enabling residents to facilitate a common, workable, cost-effective methods for evaluating, selecting, and implementing flood protection solutions. How do we achieve a collaboration with residents to evaluate and recommend interim solutions that align with the goals described above? So in the town's after action report, the conclusion is the town is committed to infrastructure resilience and community safety. Well, if we don't have that complete berm all around with the floodgates to keep the waters out, the infrastructure is not protected. You raise a house, water comes in, and the flood comes into the garage. You have two EVs. The EVs get flooded. The batteries catch fire. The cars burn up. The house burns down. So we really need to come up with that solution, that perimeter solution. That's the true solution. Also, too, I mentioned last time the insurance costs. Over a 20-year period, it won't be unusual for people to pay upwards of about $74,000, $78,000 over that 20 years for flood insurance. If we had the perimeter, full perimeter, the insurance costs would go way down. Some people could avoid. Okay, so the matrix, and how much time do I have here? Well, anyway, the matrix, there's 6 properties, so I'll go down. There's the masonry wall with driveway barriers, that's 1. Inflation tube systems, aquadam guppy tubes. Number 3, sandbags and block and tube. Number 4, structure-only sealing, that's just sealing up the house. Raise the structure, number 5, and do nothing, number 6.
Thank you. That was perfect timing. Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other hand raised?
Yes, we have a hand raised from Bob Bundy.
Yeah, good presentation. I'm really pleased that you've committed to improving staffing when we anticipate a potential flood event. And we can really anticipate that based on weather reports as well as following real tide in the bay that will tell you how far above normal tide or predicted tide the actual tide is running. And when we can anticipate that it's over 7.5, have additional staff on hand to really help with barricades, barriers, also putting out the sandbags in advance to really have everybody have sandbags available to them when we're anticipating a potential storm like that. Some people put it off to the last minute, and it's up to the town, I think, to really have that available. I also want to recognize the importance of the Marina Village berm. We've been focused on the berm primarily on the north side, where it's close to failure at some king tide events. But as Adam discussed, the actual failure was at the berm behind the homes on Harbor that we're sorting out, whose property that is on. I think those were probably built up initially when there was some dredging of the creek back in the 60s when you could do things like that, and they put the spoils up on the property as a way of building up a berm there. That's going to be very critical because the failure there, if it had been worse, would have caused even more damage to Marina Village, and a total failure would also impact all of East Corte Madera along 101. So that's a key spot to really look at and pay attention to. I'm hoping that we really come up with a short-term solution as well as a long-term solution for that going forward. The idea of FEMA paying to help homeowners raise their home is probably unrealistic, although as Roy Wolford has mentioned in the past, rather than presenting it as a sea level rise problem, we present it as a subsidence problem. We might have a chance, but it's probably a greater chance that Florida will get the money than California as long as we have Trump in power. But thanks for all your work on this. I think we're making progress and coming up with some plans. Thank you.
Thank you.
No other hands raised, and no emailed public comment for this item.
All right, then. Do we have any other? I know we do have some more comment from the dais. We'll start with Councilmember Ravazio.
Thank you very much, Mayor Thomas. My question is sort of where are we getting our expertise on what we should be doing, and are we bringing in the best expertise we can find? If you look at Amsterdam on a Google map, it looks a lot like a future Corte Madera. You know, the fingers of water are managed. They've been managing water inundation for 3,000 years, I think, in those areas. So, you know, and we're using engineers from Amsterdam to design bike roads up in San Rafael. So I just want to make sure that we're reaching out to the best people, the best thinking, the best practices we can, and we're not just assuming that the best way to stop water is to pile up mud. I just think we really need to make sure that we're budgeting enough to hire really good professional expertise from places that know what they're doing, that have done it before. That's all I wanted to say.
Any comments down here? Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to start by just saying kudos to staff. Great presentation. Thank you. And I think, you know, the success of the response was reflected in the tenor of the community workshop that we had. I think, you know, those were 80-something residents who had just experienced really bad flooding, and that could have very well been like a pitchforks and torches experience. And instead, you know, I thought it was really constructive and overall positive. And I think that's a reflection in the residents of the confidence that they have in the job that you guys are doing. So thank you. I'm also really impressed with, you know, all of the actions that you've outlined here. Don't really have anything to add. I mean, I think we're doing everything right. Short term, we're looking at optimizing town operations. Short to medium term, we're doing what we can to try and help residents raise their homes and protect their property on an individual basis. And long term, we are moving for real on trying to, you know, start these projects for big long term, you know, capital projects that are going to provide real flood barriers, and you know, berms to protect our community. So that's fantastic. I think the only thing that I still struggle with is just, again, you know, king tides are fundamentally a predictable event. We already know that we've got them coming up for Christmas this year. It does chagrin me that we lost a whole bunch of computers at the Corp Yard due to flooding for a king tide. So I just really want to make sure that we are also implementing protocols where, look, if we know there's a king tide coming, even if we don't expect it to be, you know, as high as it might be, can we please just, the Corp Yard is literally on Corte Madera Creek. Can we please just unplug the computers and put them on the desktops before we go home for the weekend or something? I mean, that's the only thing that I really struggle with. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that. We're definitely implementing a policy to store computers higher on desks. I think after 30 years, you know, everyone forgot, but it's not the first time it's happened.
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes, I'm glad you're going to be making sandbags more available. But given the age of much of our population, and as a geezer, dragging sandbags really isn't something that I think a lot of our elderly population can do. On a demonstration basis, can you look into getting some guppy tubes or stuff like that where you can just sort of drag them across in front of your garage, fill them with water, and see if that keeps the wake from driving cars from going into people's houses and garages. I do know that a guppy tube, you can get roughly 500 linear feet of it for about $4,000. So, other than that, it's sort of like, you look at your neighbors and you say, well, what can we do for them? Because
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, my comment will just be that, thank you for the report. And what's interesting is this last weekend, I got an alert from I can't remember if it was probably Alert Marin. Yeah, that was like, don't park your car in low-lying areas. Don't, it was like, it was a warning, like it was going to be a king tide. And I thought, wow, they are definitely they're taking a different approach now. So I can see that there is a difference with the way things are communicated, because it wasn't raining. It was, and I don't think it was
And I think there's a balance there, right? I think because you start getting those and you don't see any sort of impact, you start to maybe ignore those. And I know that's always a balance that our first responders are trying to hit the right balance with Nixles and Alert Marines and other emergency sort of notifications. So I got that one too, and I was like, it threw me off because I wasn't sure. Well, we certainly didn't see any of the normal impacts with that. So that's why I think we're trying to set these actual thresholds where and maybe Alert Marin has a lower threshold, but yes, I mean, at one hand, it's great to see there is a real more change in attitude, but I also want to save those for the real sort of concerning events potentially as well.
and I understand, and people go back to what wasn't available, who wasn't available on the 2nd, but I was at a press conference after the storm, and there was someone there from the National Weather Service, and they admitted that they underestimated it. They had underestimated the height of the tide. So it didn't, honestly, I mean, I hear people talking a lot about having more people on that weekend and all that. Wouldn't have made a hill of beans difference. It really wouldn't have, because there was nothing you could do. That water, there was nowhere to pump it. There was, it was higher than anyone expected. And I don't think, I think it was a terrible thing, but I don't think it was anything that we were warned for or could have been ready for. But we've learned from that event that it can be that bad. And I think that we're going to do everything we can. I trust you all are doing everything you can to make sure that, when it comes again in 100 years, we will be ready. So thank you for all you're doing right now, and it's going to pay dividends, I'm sure, in the future. So
Wish I believed it's going to be for another 100 years.
Well, yeah, I don't know. That's the thing, is we don't know, but that's why we want to be as ready as we can be for living where we live, right? We are taking everywhere you could live, you're taking a risk. If you live in tornado country, if you live in earthquake, but some things are, but we live on this earth, and it's what we have to deal with. So
if I may, just one last thing, I do want to respond, and I think just to recognize Roy's work. I mean, he is putting a lot of effort into sort of trying to push the envelope forward in terms of what are the options out there, especially for private homeowners and private residents. And I think there are some potential creative options there. I do want to say, at this point, from a capacity standpoint, for us to start, and also I just think our role is not necessarily to provide guidance and recommendations for each and every property owner in terms of how to mitigate flooding for their particular property. It's a challenge. Every property is a little bit different, and every homeowner is going to have a little bit different of a cost benefit ratio on but I do think we can, and this is the idea with the fair and the vendor fair, is trying to bring products and information to our residents about what's out there. And I think we'll continue to try to do that. But I just want to thank Roy for his work on this, and we, we'll continue to work with him on some of these ideas.
Agreed. So with that, we've closed public comment, and we are just accepting this report. So we don't need any vote or anything. So we're good with that. All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. And thanks for hanging in to the late hour. And we'll move on now to item 6C, receive presentation of budget preparation, review of funds. This will be we're not dealing with numbers, but we're dealing with what the funds pay for and how they are funded. And for that, we'll have Chris Petlock, our finance director.
And just while we're changing places here a little bit, so I think this is the first of essentially 3 meetings we're going to have related to a budget amendment process. As the council recalls, the council adopted a 2-year budget last year. And so we're amending the budget. Not going to do an entirely new budget book or anything like that. But obviously, what we'll be talking about at the next meeting is a draft amendment, which will explain some of the major shifts in the budget. But today is just really more of an overview and informational presentation on the structure of the budget and some of the funds. So thanks, Chris, for being here. And just the third of the meetings will be actually then requesting that the council adopt amendments to the budget in the second meeting in June.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. So thank you so much. So I'm just based on requests, we just came forward with a little presentation just to prepare council and maybe even inform the public a little bit about the town's accounting practices and sort of a setup. First, next slide, please. So just a little bit of background. So the town council adopted a 2-year budget back on July 1st in 2025. And then we came back for a mid-year review in February, and we really didn't make any amendments at that time. It was a little early in the year. Now that the year has progressed and we've seen conditions change quite a bit, as you discussed earlier, with changes with the RVPA and all of that, and then as we've been talking about, sales tax forecast revisions have happened. And so with those changes, we've reevaluated the budget that was adopted last year. We're going to come back with some changes. Next slide, please. So in preparation for that, we just wanted to kind of talk through just some of the things that make up the town's finance system and how we do some of the accounting, just at a very high level. Not going to take you through a bachelor in accounting or anything like that right now. So tonight we're just going to talk about fund accounting, what that really means, the types of funds that there are, some of the town's key funds and their purpose. And then I'd just like to just show a little bit of Open Corte Madera, the town's transparency portal that's online. Just in case anybody wants to really get into the weeds, we can get into that. Next slide, please. So again, just at a really high level, fund accounting is distinct from private business accounting. Private businesses, they really focus on profit. In government accounting, we're really focusing on tracking resources for a specific purpose. The government accounting is governed by GASB. That's the Government Accounting Standards Board. They put out standards that we follow, while private accounting follows FASB, which is the Financial Accounting Standards Board. So they put out two different kinds of pronouncements, and at the end of the day, it results in different looking financial reports. The reports that come out of fund accounting are really about tracking how restricted funds are spent and demonstrating compliance. Next slide, please. So fund accounting, it's really purpose driven, but funds are tracked based on restrictions or donor instructions. So for example, if we're collecting a gas tax, that can only be spent on roads. Or as we were discussing earlier, paramedic tax can only really be spent on paramedic services. And it's accountability focused. So really the reports demonstrate compliance with legal or donor conditions. And so that's really the reports that we're pushing out just to show how we're spending the money, and the money is being spent how council or the public or laws govern that money to be spent. So there are several types of funds, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But really it's about, tracking restricted funds and demonstrating that they were spent in the way that they were designated. And then each fund that we'll talk about is really its own self-balancing sort of little container, has its own assets, liabilities, revenues, and expenditures kind of contained within that fund. Next slide, please. So just in general, these are the kinds of funds that there are that you'll find in the town's finances. We have the general fund, which pretty much everything happens in. That's where you find payroll, the various departments for the town. We have the special revenue funds. They track legally restricted money, for example, the gas tax. Capital project funds, that's just for capital projects and tracking both the revenues that come in to fund those projects and then how we're spending those funds. Debt service fund kind of speaks for itself. That's just tracking debt and the payments of those debts. And then permanent funds. So that's sort of like an endowment, and the principal would stay intact, and then proceeds from that revenue can be spent in certain ways. And then enterprise funds like SD2 or sort of like the Parks and Rec department here at the town. Those are set up sort of like enterprise funds. Next slide, please. So, and then the town's key funds, the general fund, that's what we talk a lot about here. We report on that monthly. And that's where all the town's departments really lay, whether that's code enforcement or administration. The revenues that go into the general fund are property taxes, the 1% sales tax, permits and fees that are collected by the town. And then the expenses are generally the operating expenses of the town. So another key fund is the Affordable Housing Fund. And this is a fund next slide, please. The next is just the Affordable Housing Fund that the town established to help out with building costs associated with developing affordable housing. Next slide, please. So then the Capital Equipment and Technology Fund. Again, this fund is generally funded by the general fund. Surpluses from the general fund that the council designates to go in there into this fund, and then purchases from this fund are generally like trucks, cars, the Vector trucks, sweepers, and those kinds of things happen in this particular fund. Next slide, please. And then the Capital Improvement Fund. Again, this particular fund takes funds from other agencies like TAM Measure A, and then those funds are utilized. Generally, they're combined with other funds, and then they're used to achieve council priorities in accordance with the restrictions that are laid on the Measure A apportionments. Next slide, please. And then another fund that we talk about a lot here is the Measure F Sales Tax Fund. the revenues all go into this particular fund, and then the town utilizes those funds based upon the way the tax code was written, the tax was written, and then of course this council designates for infrastructure, fire prevention, flood control, safe route to schools, and disaster preparedness, among others. And then this fund has a sales tax oversight committee that meets each year after the audit's done. And then they come back and report to council that we spent the money the way that council intended it to be spent. Next slide, please. This is the grants and TAM fund. Again, funding here it comes in and is generally utilized and combined with other funding sources to achieve priorities generally in the town's capital plan. Housing Assistant Fund. This was set up to assist residents with housing payments during COVID-19. This fund is still sitting there to be utilized. Measure A Parks Fund. This revenue in this fund generally comes from Measure A and is used for currently used for implementing the town's park master plan. Next slide, please. The insurance fund. Thank you. So the insurance fund, this is just tracking the insurance costs, both the liability and workers' comp. And the revenues in this fund come from transfer from the general fund. Next slide, please. Park and lieu. This records parkland dedication fees. So generally large projects, they have to pay, they might have to pay a fee to construct parks. And so I think the last project that happened out of this fund was the new town bathroom over next to the community center. Next slide, please. So then the Corte Madera Center Fund. This is generally the revenues from this fund are proceeds from rent at Corte Madera, and then the proceeds then pay the debt service on that property. They fund some operating expenses that happen there. And then maintenance at that property. Next slide, please. The Recreation Capital Trust Fund. Again, this fund is just for recreation projects. I believe a lot of this is funded. The revenue that goes into this is from Measure A, and all of the funds here are spent on recreation capital projects and the recreation master plan. Next slide, please. And then the Recreation Fund. This is another enterprise fund for the town. This is where all of the program revenues, the town council does put funds into the Recreation Fund, but this is where all your recreation programs happen. And again, all the revenue and expenses related to the Parks and Rec program happen within this fund. Next one. And then Road Maintenance and Rehab Fund. This is funded from SB1, and the revenues come into this fund, and it can usually the funds here are combined with other funds, and then used to fix up the roads and maintain streets and so on. Next slide, please. Sanitary District Number 2. This is another enterprise fund for the town, and the revenues from this come from user surcharges, property tax, and all of the happenings in this fund are related to providing sewer service here in the town. And next slide. And then another restricted fund. This is the gas tax fund. Again, gas tax comes in, and usually the funds here are combined with other funds that come into the town, and they're specifically used for street maintenance and so on. And same thing here, street impact fees. So these fees are generated here by the town. So when projects generate impacts or what are estimated to be impacts, the town collects those fees. We hold on to those fees and then again combine them with other sources of funds to offset the impacts of streets and roads that those projects might cause. And then the town capital fund. And this is again, revenues coming into this are designated by council generally from surpluses in the general fund. And then the town utilizes those funds and generally again, combine them with other funds to tackle the 5-year capital plan that the council has adopted. Slide. And then the Shoreline Fund. So this fund was set up to do some parking improvement over at the Village Shopping Center. The last debt payment on this was done this year, so this fund is closed unless council decides to do something else with it. And next up. So I just wanted to also talk about Open Corte Madera as we're digging into the budget. You know, again, I'm here to answer council's questions and your questions, but if anybody wants to dig into it themselves, here on the town's website, if you navigate to the finance page, and then down there on the bottom right, you'll see Open Corte Madera. And if you were to click on that, next slide, please. That'll bring you to this landing page, which is the beginning of our up-to-date financials. So if we run checks today, those checks will show up here tomorrow. Usually processes overnight. And if you were to go ahead and click on one of those charts there, either revenues or expenses, next slide, please. It'll bring you to a page like this, and this is just a chart showing this one's just showing revenues. If you were to click the other one, it would just show you the expenses, and you can click on that and it'll just bring you to charts and charts and charts. But if you scroll down, next slide, please, you'll find this numerical table that supports the graph up above. And here you can get into the weeds of the town's finances. And if next slide, please. And here, I think maybe 2 slides. I think okay. So right here, so for example, I clicked on or used the drop down for permits and revenues. And again, I'm just looking at, highlighted the paramedic tax, which rolls up into that top line item. And you can do that with any one of these and drill further and further in. So that's Open Corte Madera. And this is, of course, available to the public. And if you have questions about how to use that or navigate any of that, I'd be glad to help you out. So up here for any questions you have. And again, I hope this was informative.
Thank you very much. So do we have any questions from the dais? No. I just have one little question. So the fund that was set up to help people with housing during COVID-19, has it been repurposed or is it?
I don't have it off the top of my head if there's
Okay.
even any money sitting in that
Okay.
fund, but it is sitting there. I know the affordable housing does have some fund balance in there. I've talked with the community development director, Amy Lyle, about it, and she says, hoping for an opportunity.
Mhm.
Maybe more funds can make it in there at some point for that opportunity.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question. Do we have anybody online with questions?
We do not have hands raised from our attendees online. We also didn't receive any emailed public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. So I am coming back for any comments. All right. Thank you. And
bet.
thank you for staying up late. So in that case, we're, closing public comment and thanking Finance Director Petlock for his information. I think it's a great reference that we will be using. I know I will be using it as we go forward. So thank you very much.
Of course.
All right, then. With that, we're going to move on to council reports. And we'll start with the town manager.
Thank you, Council. Just a couple for you. I first just want to start by saying it's been a busy couple weeks with structure fires. And so I just want to acknowledge the great work of our Central Marin Fire Authority firefighters and Nick Gabbard, our battalion chief, was here in the audience. He's been to all of them, I think. But really, we had one last week, I think at the beginning of last week I never know how to pronounce this word, but it's the Wadiak, a commercial fire, commercial building. And so really with a lot of valuable vehicles stationed in or located in there that they were able to put out really quickly and save a lot of value of the property. Another one toward the middle or end of last week at 385 Corte Madera Avenue, right up on the hill here, which was contained to, I think, a single room as well. But certainly they were there very rapidly in order to put that fire out. And then just today at 11:43, another house fire or structure fire located I think that was started by an outside grill at 61 Granada on the east side. And so again, just, very fortunate. There's been some windy days and just speed is everything. And so I just want to congratulate our excellent fire authority with their rapid response and skill in containing those. Let's see. Just a note for something that our Amy Lyle informed me that the Marin County Housing Working Group will be holding a planning commissioner training in this room on June 1st. It's actually a very substantial training on land use and housing law, everything from housing law to regional housing solutions, objective design standards, CEQA. She extended the invitation to extend it to all of you. I think we will be having some, significant housing projects coming through, the Planning Commission. I know 56 Madera will also actually be reviewed by the town council. So just as a heads up, I'll send the flyer out if you're interested. It's from like 2 to 8 with dinner and networking as well being provided. This is being done by the county. So heads up there. We've restarted work at Mankey Park. The biologist has confirmed that the birds have flown the coop, so to speak, and they're out. And so work has restarted. And so back on schedule. Don't have a firm date of when they'll be finished, but still expecting it to be before July 4th. And then, of course, there's the establishment of the grasses need to be done. And then we did issue a notice of an award to a contractor who came in under the bid for the intergenerational center. I think it was about 345 to 350,000. And so before we issue the notice to proceed, we're working through, we have a meeting tomorrow and just confirming the building permit is in hand and when that will be done. But at least the contractor is starting with contract docs and things like that and can do some of the paperwork. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Council member reports. Start. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm good. I may have my dates off a little, but on May 11th, the Committee for Corte Madera Citizen of the Year met. I won't go into details because it's a surprise. 513 age-friendly Corte Madera met. And again, I think on the 31st we're doing, and I can't say that word, the celebration for our residents that are over 90. Not, thank you. 514, I attended the Chamber Mixer, which was at Club Wheelhouse, which was really great event. Anybody hasn't been in there, you should go check it out. They had a McLaren in front inside that it was a 3-seater, but the driver's seat is in the middle. So it was like it's like a cockpit type. It was really cool. They had older Ferraris in there also, but it's a really great place. Also on 514, there was a Central Marin Police Authority meeting there. A couple of things there. It's budget season, so we approved the budget. I think Chris has probably already factored in the numbers into our budget. And one thing is, I'll say CMPA, they're on the cutting edge. We approved 3 more EV patrol cars and 2 unmarked patrol cars. By the end of next fiscal year, which would be 26, 27, 50% of Central Marin Police vehicles will be EVs. So again, we keep moving towards fully electronic. They're also in the process of finishing up, hopefully within this year or so, of installing 28 EV chargers. And if you ever see one of the patrol cars, if you look from the back, you'll see little blue lettering that says electric vehicle on it. And I did ask about patrol officers and sergeants using those vehicles, and it took a little getting used to, and now they love them. So that's good. And I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Andrews. All right. I'm sure you've got things.
Relatively short. May 11th, I had a confidential briefing with MCE staff, and I can report that the CEO is on leave and the COO is acting as CEO for the time being. And on May 12th, we had a Central Marin Sanitation Agency board meeting, and I don't have anything noteworthy to report from there.
Yeah. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. I attended the Safe Routes to School on May 14th, and we did hear that the longtime director who actually founded the program is retiring, Wendy Callens, which was a difficult thing to hear because I think that she was really pivotal in making all this happen. Crossing guards was a big topic, and I apologize to Adam for not bringing this forward sooner, but I've been away. But I confirmed that there are only 2 paid crossing guards in West Corte Madera, although there are 3 sites where there seem to be crossing guards needed. The Pixley site, the new site at Lakeside where there was an accident, and they were questioned about that and said, oh no, the statistics clearly show that a crossing guard is needed there, even though there was just this one accident that kind of spurred them into action on that. And residents are very accustomed to a guard at Tamalpais and Eastman. So that means so we're planning, I believe, and Adam, please correct me if I'm wrong, to relocate the Pixley Guard to Tamalpais. But that's against the recommendations of State Route to School, so we may be vulnerable there. So we should look into it. They've asked us to pay $25,000 for an additional crossing guard. The school is often the one who does that. There are no cities that pay for crossing guards now, but I said I would pass that on. And the only other thing that I wanted to report on, I attended a few of those other things, but at the Cal City's mayor and council members monthly meeting, there was a lengthy discussion about smaller towns taking some kind of action against the state regarding unfunded mandates, such as a public information request, which I guess new laws have made them much more time consuming, take a lot more staff time due to, changes, and are especially hard on smaller towns with limited staff. So there may be a small towns initiative thing starting to help protect us from mandates that big cities kind of can handle much more readily than we can. So I just wanted to inform about that. And that's it.
I, on May 11th, also was at the Citizen of the Year discussion meeting, and it's a secret. And
NDA.
we had to sign an NDA, right? And then May 14th, also, I was at Police and Fire, where I think we approved vehicle, in addition to the vehicles for police, we also, on fire, we approved a new vehicle for battalion chief. So that, I think, I don't remember, is that one electric or not? I can't remember. And I think that might have been all, but it doesn't seem quite right, but that's all I have that I can see right now. All right. So with that, the next thing is any additions? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One last thing. There's also, I would be remiss if I didn't say, there's also the quilt presentation, May 28th. So please, first presentation by Richard Block.
The quilt presentation, the Corte Madera quilt. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I might have to bug out of something else, but I'm going to be here for that. Yeah. Okay. So, also, is there anything that anyone wants to add to the agenda for the 2nd? Nope. All right then. So with that, we are adjourned.